procaptains.org. There you'll find out details of the PCA, including what we do for Pro Captains as your trade association, details on member benefits, and of course, how to join. And for the recreational boaters out there, we will be having something for you soon if you're interested in joining, so that's coming soon. So again, this evening's seminar is titled Rules for a Busy Bay. And typically our seminars are geared towards the professional boat captains. However, we all want to make the waterways safer. And we at the PCA feel that it is our obligation to share knowledge with recreational boaters to help ensure safer waterways, which of course led us to where we are this evening. So tonight's presenter, Captain Kent Dresser. He is the grouchy looking guy with the beard who you'll meet soon. He looks like a boat captain because he is a boat captain. So he began his career assisting vessels on Narragansett Bay at the young age of 15 when he signed on as a dispatcher and deckhand for a safe sea, which in turn led to a 28-year relationship with the organization. After receiving his degree in marine affairs from the University of Rhode Island, he went to begin working his way up the Hawes Pipe on ocean-going tugboats for Marine Hour Transportation in New York City. He founded Confident Captain in 2003 and has written and launched dozens of maritime training programs for mariners nationwide. Kent wrote and implemented a groundbreaking risk management training program for first response vessel operators nationwide. And though he has since retired from teaching hands-on boating personally, he was the first commercial hands-on boating instructor in the state of Rhode Island, having personally taught hundreds of Narragansett Bay boaters how to handle their boats like a pro. And last but not least, he founded the PCA of Professional Captains Association back in 2020. So by the numbers, Captain Kent has 31 years in the maritime industry. He successfully assisted over 3,000 vessels stranded in New England and Florida waters. And he has successfully trained over 3,500 professional boat captains, first responders, and military personnel. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to hand it over to Captain Kent Dresser. Kent.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for catching me at the one grumpy moment that I'll have probably for the whole evening. Guys, thanks so much for coming. It's really great to see you. A lot of familiar faces out there and a lot of folks that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. Thank you for being here. You know, I know everybody is probably had enough Zoom as of late. And, you know, I'm acutely aware that it's 7 o'clock at night and folks have other things to do. So, you know, I value your time and I will do my best to be efficient and make it a productive use of your time. When we started the Professional Captains Association, we did so with three things in mind, right? We wanted to primarily provide a source of professional development for the 100-ton boat captain, of which there's not many of those out there. And there's a need for professional development among any professional. And there's tens of thousands of 100-ton boat captains in the United States of America. We also wanted to provide advocacy for that same group of people. And last but not least, networking and opportunity for the same group of people. It didn't take long throughout the process of developing our organization. We said, well, geez, one of the things that we are faced as a job hazard is safety on the water, our own safety with our own equipment and our own crew, but also during the busy boating season. Of course, there's an interaction of professional commercial vessels and recreational vessels. And there's no catalyst between the two. There's rarely a catalyst between the two. And there should be. And I felt quite obligated as, you know, a leader of an organization that represents those folks to be, you know, to create a catalyst, to create an opportunity to share knowledge, to create an opportunity to, you know, not swap sea stories, but to have anecdotal evidence of the ways that we think boating can be better, how we can help, and how recreational boaters can help. But mostly just so folks can have a safer time on the water. My time spent teaching recreational boaters, I found most of the questions revolved around safety and revolved around the other boat and revolved around, you know, what do I do? The mechanics of boat, of course, you know, the mechanics, the fundamentals of boat handling, all things that we teach and are easily learnable. But getting into the head of the other boat that's out there, the other boat operator, getting into the head of the person driving the towboat, the tugboat, the ship, the pilot boat. That's more challenging. That's more challenging from a recreational boater standpoint. I have this sort of unique, uh, resume because I spent so much time towing and salvaging all the types of boats, recreation, commercial boats. Commercial boats break down and run into have mishaps as well. I spent so much time working with them that I've sort of have um, you know, a long history of understanding where things are going wrong, and I want to be part of the solution. I feel very strongly that professional captains of all types should lead the charge in helping to disperse knowledge amongst all other boaters. When we start off, sometimes we have some very safe boating classes, and when we start them off, I'll say, so and so, how much experience do you have on the water? Well, 5 years. Okay. Well, if you have 5 years of recreational boating experience on the water, you have about 50 days. Because the season up here is about 10 to 12 weeks long. And you're going to miss a week or two because you're going to go on vacation, or one weekend the weather's not going to be good, and you get out 1 or 2 days a week, and it ends up maybe 10 to 15 days a year. And so it's more challenging to really get an in-depth feel for how to do all of the above, operate the boat, understand the rules of the road, understand the traffic. And so hopefully you'll find that this is a helpful solution to some of that. What I did was, I hate to use the word hodgepodge, but it really is. It's a hodgepodge of information that was input from the other professional boat captains that are within the organization and that are on staff, and even just some of my friends and associates that we reached out to saying, what are some topics, in this environment where we're going to talk about rules for a busy bay as they apply to all mariners, but with an emphasis on, some tangible takeaways for the recreational boater, so they can, feel a little bit more confident on the water, so they can understand a little bit some of the situational awareness and have a more comprehensive understanding of what's happening around them. And I put all those things together, and we developed this presentation. I basically wrote them all down in some chicken scratch, and Kate did a remarkable job of turning them into a very graphic and a very excellent looking presentation. So thanks, Kate, very much for helping there. So without further ado, let me get into a screen share here so everybody can see Kate's masterful work. Bear with me for a second while I share my screen. All right, you should be able to see that now. Is that showing up for you guys? If a couple of you can give me a nod, that would be great.
I can see it. You're good.
Good.
You're okay.
Fantastic. So, in the case we have boaters really now from up and down the East Coast. I know that we have a group of people in Boston. So I apologize for using the home field advantage of a chart of Narragansett Bay, but it is a busy and very dynamic area for all types of different traffic, and so it's certainly an appropriate battleground for us to use in a teaching format. And so I'll do my best to try to relate things to all of the different harbors. I certainly spent a lot of time in and out of Boston Harbor when I was going to sea on tugboats out of New York. So I'm familiar with the area, and there's certainly a lot of similarities to our home port here in Narragansett Bay. I want to start off with some noteworthy rules. So when you get your captain's license, you have to come to me, and I'm going to teach you rules of the road, and I'm going to teach you 38 of them plus some annexes. There ends up being close to 45 by the time all is said and done. Okay. I don't think it's appropriate for you to know all of them in the amount of detail that I expect a professional boat captain, or more appropriately, the U.S. Coast Guard expects a professional boat captain. But there's some noteworthy rules. And, anytime information gets to a marina, if you spend any time hanging out at the marina, the information sort of varies from dock to dock and from boat to boat. And so my thought was, let's take some of the more noteworthy rules, let's set the record straight on them, and let's make people aware that they're out there. If you want to write questions down, it's tough with so many people in the room to field questions as I talk. But if you, come across a question, by all means, jot it down. and I'll do my best to answer it at the end of the presentation. So, some noteworthy rules for recreational boaters. First of all, there is actually a rule that requires you to use good seamanship. And in fact, it's the second rule of the road. The first rule tells you where all the rules apply. They apply upon the high seas and waters connected to the high seas that are navigable by seagoing vessels. And then the first thing they say is, we expect you to show good seamanship. We expect you to use due regard for the dangers, the hazards of navigation, and the dangers of collision with the vessels around you. And if you stop and think about that for a minute, it's a little bit daunting in that it's not clear as to, it doesn't define good seamanship for you, but it should emphasize your overriding responsibility in order to do so. And, is it appropriate to, or is it okay if you do something that doesn't show a master level of seamanship? Of course not. A recreational boater is not going to have a master level of seamanship because you may not have that much experience. I've seen some folks that have said hello that are in their first or second year of boating. So I don't say this for it to be daunting. I don't say this for it to make anybody feel bad. I just say it because I want you to understand that it's the founding premise of the rules of the road. The first and most important thing that we can do is use good seamanship and to have due regard for the hazards of navigation and collision. A noteworthy rule that I wanted to point out is Rule 5 of the Rules of the Road, which requires you to keep a proper lookout. And it actually requires you to keep a proper lookout by sight, hearing, and all available means. So if you have a radar, they expect you to be using it, even on a sunny day. If you have a VHF radio, they expect you to have it turned on and tuned into channel 16, which is the International Hailing and Distress Channel. Now, listen, there's nobody driving around patrolling and enforcing these rules. These rules only come to a head if you have an incident or a collision or something goes wrong and somebody is investigating it and asks you about them. It's not like seatbelt laws where if you drive by a police car and you don't have your seatbelt on, you could potentially get a ticket for that. So, it is a little bit on the honor system, but I'm not an enforcer. I'm just an informer. So a proper lookout also includes a head and a stern. I can tell you that in my towboat days, as a first responder, we were fast. We had fast boats when we were traveling with a light boat, and we would overtake many boats. And I could almost count on any boat I was overtaking in certain areas to take a turn to the side, which I was overtaking, and they really would never see me back there. So part of a lookout is looking back behind you and seeing what's going on, particularly before you make a significant course change or any sort of a course change. So if you take a Rhode Island State safe boating course, they will tell you the speed limit in Narragansett Bay. It's 35, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong here, but if I remember correctly, it's 35 miles an hour during the day, and it's 25 miles per hour at night, okay? There is no written speed limit in the US Coast Guard rules of the road. What they define is safe speed, and it's the 6th rule, and all vessels at all times are required to travel at a safe speed. They actually list 6 factors that you should take into consideration when you're determining a safe speed. They include the traffic density, the maneuverability of your vessel, the presence of background lights, the visibility, your draft in relation to the depth of navigable water, nearby navigational hazards, and so on. So most of those things you would expect people to sort of naturally take into consideration. If you're getting into shallow water and you're aware of the fact that you're in shallow water, you're probably going to slow down because you never really want to go faster than you never want to approach anything, including the land, faster than you're willing to hit it. So when we talk about safe speed, I thought it was valuable for you to understand that, yes, the speed limit in Narragansett Bay is 35 miles an hour, okay? But the overriding rule is the safe speed rule. And safe speed is defined as a speed so you can take proper and effective action to avoid collision. So if you're traveling in a heavily congested area, say underneath the Newport Bridge at 35 miles an hour on a Saturday when there's a lot of boats out, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you are very likely violating the rules of the road by not traveling at a safe speed. You notice I haven't brought wake into the conversation yet, and wake is always a very popular topic among all recreational and commercial boaters. I'll get to that in the future later on this evening. But I wanted to point out the safe speed rule because I think a lot of people say, hey, listen, when I drive on the road, folks, like I consider myself to be a fairly safe and conscientious driver, but I guarantee you I am breaking the speed limit at almost all times while I'm driving. Maybe not by a lot, certainly not when I'm driving by my neighbor's house, but when I'm on a regularly driving around, I tend to drive a little bit on the faster side. I'm prepared to be pulled over and get a ticket if I've broken the speed limit. But there's no rule on the road that says, hey, Kent, your speed was not safe because of 6 different factors. There's a sign on the side of the road. It's really clear. It's not that clear on the water. And the factors to take into consideration can feel somewhat ambiguous from time to time. So there's things to ponder, and the takeaway is there's more to it than just a number. Okay. Immediately after the Coast Guard tells you in Rule 6 that you need to travel at a safe speed, that all vessels at all times need to travel at a safe speed, then they go on to define the risk of collision. And the risk of collision is with any vessel where you have a steady bearing and a decreasing range. Okay, so the bearing in the most simple terms is where something is in relation to you. So if something is dead ahead of you, and the range is of course the distance. So if something is bearing dead ahead of you and it's 100 feet away, and then it's 99 feet away, and 98, 97, and so on and so forth, you're obviously going to collide with each other. Okay. Now, remember on the water that relative motion doesn't have to be directly in front of you. It could be aside you, and it absolutely 100% could be astern of you. And that's why it's so critically important to know where everybody is in your vicinity and where they are in relation to you at all times. So is a steady bearing alone a risk of collision? No, it's reason for a slightly heightened level of concern. But a steady bearing with a decreasing range, by the rules of physics, is going to result in a collision if somebody doesn't either change the course or change the speed. If you are in doubt, and this happens all the time, tens of thousands of times, certainly in my career, you look out the window, you see another boat, he's off in the distance, you're scratching your head saying, we're going to collide with this guy? This has happened to everybody in this room. Even the brand new boater who took his first lesson yesterday has said, hey, am I going to collide with this guy? Okay. And when you say that, you must assume that you're going to. You must assume that you're going to. So it's funny because we often talk about don't make assumptions. The Coast Guard actually tells you to assume. And it's if doubt of collision exists, you should assume that it does. Okay. Also, when you are making a course change to avoid a collision, it should be early and ample. Okay. Early is so, the sooner the better in terms of preventing a collision, but ample is so if you make a large course change, it is visibly apparent to the other vessel who is also hopefully scratching his head or her head saying, gee, are we going to hit this person? So if you make a larger course change, it's much more apparent to the other boats around you what you're doing. So, and then the final sort of noteworthy rule, there is a rule number 9 titled narrow channels. And this is a question I get a lot. I'll be, I don't know, at the yacht club or at the marina or someplace near the water, and someone will come up to me and they'll say, Ken, I know you're an expert on the rules. Don't I have the right of way over that ship coming up Narragansett Bay because I'm under sail? And they'll always, of course, I'll move out of his way, but don't I actually have the right of way? There's no, and also no. 3 no's there. And we'll go into why 3 no's later. All right. But a vessel that is sailing, a vessel that is less than 20 meters long, let's call it 65 feet to make it an easy number. If your boat's less than 65 feet, if it's sailing, if it's crossing the channel, or if it's fishing, it is directed expressly in the rules of road not to impede the passage of a vessel that has to stay within a channel for safe navigation. Okay, so let's talk about what a narrow channel is for a minute. If you're driving, so I have a recreational vessel. It's a center console. It's a Sea Hunt. It's 22 feet long. It has a 225 horsepower outboard. If I'm traveling in the East Passage of Narragansett Bay, am I in a narrow channel relative to my vessel? No. But I'm in a narrow channel relative to the largest vessel in that area. If there was a tank ship or a car ship or a tug pushing a barge or a Navy vessel or a NOAA vessel or any other host of big boats that come up through that channel, if you think about it, they've got to come in past Castle Hill. They've got to round, make a turn at the Dumplings. They got to get themselves heading straight for the Newport Bridge, because nobody appreciates it when a ship hits a bridge. That always creates a lot of problems. Then they've got to get themselves headed over to the east side of Gould Island. So in the eyes of the bigger boat, that's an extremely narrow channel, and it takes a lot to get through it. So when you sail out in your J22, it makes the job a lot harder, and they may or may not be able to stop in time to prevent collision. They'll try, but they have to keep themselves and their crew and their cargo safe as well. So a narrow channel is relative to the biggest boat in the channel. And there's a narrow channel in Narragansett Bay. Let me go back a few slides here, that runs. Here's Newport for reference, if you can see my mouse. Kate, can they see my mouse right there? Okay. So if you come up Narragansett Bay and you come up the East Passage, and here's Castle Hill, here's Newport, here's Rose Island, you go underneath the Newport Bridge, and you head up on the east side of Gould Island, all the way up to Providence is a narrow channel. So, and there's a little split here where the car ships go over to Quonset. So if you're in these two areas, which will show up on your chart or on your GPS, that's a relatively narrow channel. Now, if you're coming into Wickford Harbor or even into Newport, areas like that, those areas are considerably smaller. But if you're in, say, Newport Harbor, and there's a 150-foot yacht navigating in the same channel, you have to kind of put yourself in that operator's shoes. You have to kind of say to yourself, is that vessel considering this channel to be narrow? So look, there's 38 rules of the road. They include the lights that are supposed to be shown on your vessel, and those sound signals you're supposed to be sounding in the fog, and when you're maneuvering and communicating with each other. But all of the first 18, 19 rules of the road, which we call the steering and sailing rules, these were the ones that I felt were the most important to point out from a theoretical standpoint. Then, of course, there's some operating rules, in particular, who gives way to who. And when you're in a power-driven vessel, there's sort of three different scenarios that we've determined where you might have to move out of the other vessel's way, particularly when you're meeting another power-driven vessel. Now, we all know if you're in a power-driven vessel and you're meeting a sailing vessel, you're supposed to move out of the way. I'm going to talk more about that in a little while. But let's say you're meeting another power-driven vessel. Now, we're not in that narrow channel I was talking about. We're not in, a harbor. We're not in an area of shell. We're just out on the bay enjoying ourselves. And we're in a small boat. I'm in my 22-foot boat, and I see another, 22, 30, 40-foot boat navigating, and I need to make some navigational decisions based on our aspect towards each other. Okay. Now, if in the easiest scenario is if you are overtaking another boat. Doesn't matter, by the way, what type it is. If you're overtaking another vessel, he has the right of way. I spoke incorrectly there, and I apologize. I shouldn't have done that. That's some slang that we throw around in the captain business, and it's an inappropriate way to say it. Okay. If you're overtaking someone, he's the stand-on vessel, and you are directed to give way. All right. We hear the term right away all the time. Raise your hand if you've heard the term right away before. Okay. For the most part, with the exception of one very rare instance in the Western rivers, there's no such thing as right of way. I know we use the term. It's sort of agreed upon by professional boat captains what it means, but the rules of the road don't actually call it the right of way. They call it the giveway vessel and the stand-on vessel. Because at the end of the day, you'll learn in later rules that I'm going to talk about here shortly, everybody has the obligation to prevent collision. All right. So if you're in a power-driven vessel, any vessel, and you're overtaking another vessel, you are directed to give way, and the vessel that's being overtaken is directed to stand on until such point that collision becomes imminent. Then it is up to both vessels to prevent the collision. If you're in a power-driven vessel and you're crossing courses with another power-driven vessel, then the vessel on the right-hand side is the stand-on vessel, and the vessel on the left-hand side is the give-way vessel. Sorry, Kate. Hold on here. We just had a technical glitch, and I was looking at my slides. Yeah. So that's denoted. So I had to get back on track on another monitor there. And that's denoted by your navigation lights. So if you're approaching the left-hand side of another vessel, you're going to see his port running light, which is red. At night, during the day, you're just going to see the left-hand side. Okay. The saying here, now again, this is going back to this little ambiguity of right of way, but more important than you understanding, in-depth sort of technical ambiguity of the rules of the road, I want you to take away the following. Right has the right. Right has the right. When two power-driven vessels are crossing, the vessel on the right is the stand-on vessel. He has the right. Okay. And again, I know that right isn't the technically correct term, but people tend to remember things that rhyme, and right absolutely rhyme. So that's how we remember it. Okay. I see this a lot when I'm leaving Wickford Harbor. Going back to my little chart here. Here's Wickford. Here. Now, when I worked for Safe Sea, those of you that know Safe Sea probably know that many of their boats tie up in Wickford, and I lived and worked out of Wickford Harbor. And let's say I was headed over to, Bristol or Portsmouth or Newport or Middletown or any of those areas. I would come out of here and head straight across Narragansett Bay. All of the boats that are coming from Warwick, Cranston, and East Greenwich that are heading out to Block Island are heading down here. When they see me, I'm on their right-hand side. Who thinks that I have the right of way there? Sorry, who thinks that I'm the stand-on vessel? Who thinks that I'm the stand-on vessel there? Yeah, it's me. It was me. How many of them, Stephen, I'll get to your question in a little bit. How many of them do you think actually moved out of my way in 28 years? Zero. So I was prepared for that. I never really had a problem with it. I just, it's clear to me that that's an unknown rule. So although technically you shouldn't use the term right of way when you're talking about the rules of the road, unless you're over in the Western rivers, the saying is the vessel on the right has the right. And what that means is the vessel on the right should stand on and the vessel on the left should give way. He or she might slow down and let the other vessel pass. He or she might make a course change and would most likely go behind the other vessel. What should not happen is a course change to the left and cross in front of the vessel. That should not happen. That's an inappropriate maneuver. So, when two power-driven vessels are meeting head-on, such down in my lower left-hand side of the screen, neither vessel has the right of way. Both power-driven vessels are required to alter course to starboard and pass port to port. Neither one is stand on. They both give way. If you're already going to pass clear starboard to starboard, that's no problem. You don't have to drive in front of and then down the other side of the other vessel. if there's no risk of collision and you're already going to pass clear on a starboard to starboard passing, that's fine. You may proceed. But if you're approaching a head-on scenario, both vessels are directed to change course, pass port to port. Okay. If you are the Giveway vessel, you're directed to give way early with early and substantial action. So it's, again, timely and physically apparent to the other vessel. If you're the stand-on vessel, the Coast Guard directs you to actually stand on. I've worked with many boaters who look at me and say, I just want to move out of everybody's way. Sorry, can't do that. If you're required to stand on, you should stand on. And in fact, the Coast Guard says that you should stand on until such a point that it becomes apparent that the Giveway vessel is not taking appropriate action, in which case you may, doesn't say must, but may take action. Okay, so if it becomes apparent that the other vessel is not taking appropriate action, even though he's the Giveway vessel, you may take action to avoid collision. If collision becomes imminent, you must take action. And I think this is a largely misunderstood part of the rules of the road amongst recreational boaters. Okay, let's say that Kate, who owns a sailboat, is sailing along, and I'm in my powerboat. And if we follow the pecking order, as you know, Kate should be the stand-on vessel. I should be the Giveway vessel. The powerboat is the Giveway vessel because it's technically more maneuverable. And I crash into Kate's sailboat. How many here with a physical raise of hands? How many people here think that it's all my fault? Raise your hand. Oh, you guys are good. Kate told me you guys were going to be good. And she's right. You guys are good. How many think that it's both of ours fault? Raise your hand. That's right. It is. No matter what. And, Harry Truman, they called him Give Him Hell Harry. I wasn't around during the Truman administration, by the way, folks. I've heard this in history books. Okay. Harry Truman, they call him Give Him Hell Harry. He said, I don't give him hell, I give him the truth. And they think it's hell. I'm only here to give you the truth. At the end of the day, if there's a collision, everybody is at fault. It's not like in your car, if you get rear-ended, the person that rear-ended is at fault. On the water, it's 50-50. We don't have a ton of sailors in the room tonight, but there are a few. Now, for the most part, if you've grown up, my children go down to the yacht club and take sailing lessons, and they learn theory, and on rainy days, they go in and tie knots and learn rules of the road and things. I, of course, expect them to have a good level of knowledge of these things. So for the most part, if you've learned to sail at some point, you've probably learned these rules already. So I'm going to move through them a little more quickly. Okay. At the end of the day, the port tack gives way to the starboard tack. If the wind is on the same side, then the windward vessel should give way to the leeward vessel, because the windward vessel will eventually be able to be more maneuverable by stealing the wind or blocking the wind from reaching the leeward vessel. Okay. And the final scenario down here in the lower left-hand side of my screen, if you're approaching another sailing vessel and you do not know what tack they are on, because perhaps their boom is obscured by a spinnaker, you must assume that they are on a starboard tack and give way. Finally, I want to talk about the pecking order. There's a lot of emphasis on the lower part of the pecking order. This, power-driven vessel should give way to the sailing vessel. But actually, that both of those vessels are way at the bottom of the pecking order. Both of you, power and sail, are supposed to give way to vessels that are not under command. Now, not under command doesn't mean nobody's driving it, by the way, and that's what it sounds like. And you have to remember that the rules of the road are interpreted into many different languages across the globe. So some of the terms that are used are very generic. Vessel not under command means it's broken down or limping home. Is probably the best way to think of it at this level of train. Okay. And then there's vessels that are considered to be restricted in their ability to maneuver, like dive boats. You see a lot of those on Narragansett Bay. They can't move. There's a diver underneath them. They can't leave. The diver wouldn't be able to find them again. If they're servicing a buoy or an aid to navigation, you don't see too many, thankfully, ships launching aircraft in this area, but you can imagine the look on the pilot's face if you were to shift course or speed while he or she was trying to land an aircraft. So those are vessels that really can't move, and they're considered to be working vessels, and the nature of their work restricts their maneuverability. They cannot maneuver as described in the rules of the road, and they have stand-on vessel in the pecking order. Okay. Closely followed by vessels that are constrained by their draft. No, don't go pulling in a Newport and telling me that you're constrained by your draft in your 50-foot boat. That is not what that means, okay? Vessels constrained by draft exist in international waters only. Not international waters, but rules, the areas of water that are promulgated by the international rules of the road, which for us is outside of Narragansett Bay, okay? They have essentially a super tanker. They draw so much water in relation to the depth and width of navigable water that they can't change course. Okay. Vessels that are fishing. Now, this is a popular misconception on Narragansett Bay and all waters all around the nation. Okay. When the Coast Guard talks about fishing vessels being the stand-on vessel in the pecking order, they're talking about fishing vessels that are using nets, lines, or trawls that restrict maneuverability. And it specifically excludes recreational fishing with rod and reel or trolling line. Okay. So if you're angling, trolling, you got a couple of lines off the back of your boat. You know, when I was driving for Safe Sea and I saw that, I would be nice and go around you, because some of those rigs are quite expensive hanging off the back of people's boats. But according to the pecking order, I did not have an obligation to do so. If I saw a commercial fishing vessel, such as a lobster vessel that was attached to a lobster trawl hauling pots, that was a significant piece of gear and was clearly restricting or obstructing its ability to maneuver as required by the rules, that would be considered a fishing vessel under the rules of the road. And a regular power-driven vessel would be directed to Giveway. Okay. Then finally, underneath all of those vessels is the sailing vessel. Underneath the sailing vessel is the power-driven vessel, and way down, lonely at the bottom, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, is the seaplane. It's funny because if you ask the FAA, they will say that the seaplane is a stand-on, and if you ask the Coast Guard, they say the seaplane is Giveway. I tell you what, I've seen a few seaplanes out there, folks, and my recommendation is to stay out of the way. Once they begin taking off or landing, there's not a lot that they can do, all right? And you're not in a hurry. You might be late for dinner, but at the end of the day, you're out boating. So just stay out of the way of the seaplane, please. Those of you who are Jimmy Buffett fans who read any of his books, you know that he crashed his seaplane. We almost lost Jimmy. And what was it? When you have two pontoons on the seaplane and they're taking off, and the pontoons start to do this because you've hit a wake, and one pontoon dug in a little bit too far, and they endoed the seaplane. That was all from a wake from not a particularly large boat. So stay out of the way of the seaplane if you possibly can, and they will greatly appreciate it. So there are some rules out there that are not rules of the road, but are very good rules of thumb. And I think those are just as important to know as the rules of the road. As someone who has a level of expertise in the rules, I cringe when people call them a rule of the road. But I understand why that happens. But I think it is important at all levels of seamanship to be able to delineate between a rule of thumb and the rule of the road. Okay, now the first one is the rule of tonnage. Right? The most inexperienced boater always comes to me and says, I know that I need to get out of that boat's way because that boat is bigger. Excuse me just one second. Sorry about that, folks. The rule of tonnage is not a rule of the road, but it is an excellent rule of thumb. I can tell you that my days on tugs, we would have folks cross in front of us. You know, a tugboat is like a tractor trailer truck. You know, a tractor trailer truck, it has the sticker on the back that says, if you can't see my mirrors, I can't see you. If you can't see the windows of the tugboat, they can't see you either. This is particularly true if they're pushing a barge in front of them. Okay. So my recommendation is, you know, give all of those vessels a wide berth. If it's much larger than you, if you can, you know, for the most part, particularly if it's a large commercial vessel, I mean, just give it a wide berth. It can be difficult to understand the relative motions involved. There could be a very large weight coming from the back of it. There's just sort of a whole host of reasons to stay away. Now, some people get out there like, I don't want to go near any ships. I'm afraid of ships. I'm like, well, there's no need to be afraid of them. But there's a very easy way to do that. Stay out of the large shipping channels. Those ships don't leave that channel, that very channel that I showed you on my Narragansett Bay chart up here. These ships won't leave this channel. They can't. There's not enough water. There's not enough water depth. So as long as you're not there, you won't have to tangle with them. That's probably the best rule of thumb in terms of just staying clear of them. Sometimes if I'm towing small boats, I feel very obligated to be in the channel for reasons that I don't need to go into detail in here. And I just stay to the right-hand side of it. And, you know, if there is another ship coming, I make it apparent as to what we're doing. Now, you can call a ship on the radio and talk to them, but, you know, when there's that many recreational boaters out on Narragansett Bay, if every single one of them starts calling a ship, he's going to have a hard time giving good information to everybody. So, all right, let's get back to, we sort of covered this already because I embarrassingly and mistakenly said right of way. And people love to use the term right of way. And so the term right of way, and the only time it's really mentioned in the rules of the road, as written by the Coast Guard, is the downbound vessel in the Western Rivers has the right of way. We're not in the Western Rivers. We're not anywhere near the Western Rivers. We're talking about the Mississippi River. In the case of boats on Narragansett Bay, you are either the Giveway vessel or the stand-on vessel. The Giveway vessel is directed to give way. The stand-on vessel is directed to stand on. And of course, we've already covered the fact that should they collide, both vessels are at fault. So, which leads very closely into the sail vessel has a right of way over power vessel. That's just not accurate. It's close, but there's no cigar. The sailing vessel is directed to stand on. The power-driven vessel is directed to give way. But again, with the example I used with Kate and I were approaching each other on the water, if there was a collision, we would both be up at fault. Okay? And I do have a fairly compelling sailboat video here for you, and I want to do a couple of things. I want to give you a little bit of a lead up to this video. One of the things that I ponder and I worry about on Narragansett Bay is, you know, look, 50 years ago, not even, I've been in the business for 30 years. I got in the business in the 90s. That's not all that long ago, really, if you stop and think about it, okay? Even in the 90s, there weren't really that many fast, powerful recreational boats. You had some Chris Crafts and some Bayliners and some Boston Whalers and lots of nice sailboats that, you know, that had like Dacron sails. And there weren't anywhere near as many of them, right? Nowadays, you go to the boat dealership and almost every boat you buy is capable of 40 or 50 knots right out of the gates. Right out of the gates. They're significantly faster. They're significantly more powerful. And that's, of course, the power boats I'm talking about. But they're also nowadays, thanks to advancement and really cool advancements in sailing, They're now building sailboats that go from 0 to 30 knots in a matter of seconds. But there's been no change to the infrastructure. Think about going back to my example of driving a car on the road. We went from the horse and buggy to the automobile. We paved the roads, didn't we? After a while, we're like, oh, we should put some asphalt down here. That would make things a lot better. That was a major infrastructure improvement. Hey, we should put some stop signs up. We should put some traffic lights up. We should get some meals on. Then somebody came up with the rotary. And that's a whole different conversation for another day, right? But the point is, the infrastructure got improved. Our infrastructure hasn't changed. In fact, our rules haven't even changed. If you stop and think about it that way for a minute, there's a lot of pressure on us to figure it out. Now, I lobby for some infrastructure change. I don't like burdensome level of governance, but there should be some better traffic control, in my opinion, on Narragansett Bay. For now, there's not. So we need to drive accordingly, right? Here's a great example of a bunch of boaters that, look, as an expert, if you hired me to be your expert witness, I would tell you all sorts of things that everybody did wrong. But let's take it down to just the recreational level, okay? I think this is a case of nobody really expected the reaction they were going to get. So watch this video. Here's some new high-tech sailboats. These boats get up and they get going, and they get going fast. And they're in a very busy, congested area. They're in the East Passage of Narragansett Bay. This guy's not quite sure what to expect. He sees some sailboats, and he thinks he's going to be able to go in front of them. What he doesn't understand is that these are sailboats that now suddenly out of the blue do 30 knots. And by the way, they levitate out of the water. So he says, oh my goodness, I better turn around and go this way, except all of this guy's friends are right behind him. That was a really close incident. I can't imagine that everybody there, wasn't quite frightened by the time it was over. Okay. Now, why am I showing you this? I'm not showing you this to criticize these mariners. I'm not showing you this to emphasize anything particular about the rules of the road. They both broke the rules of the road there. Whether they meant to or not, they both broke them. Whether they wanted to or not, they both broke them. But I want you to take away that image, understanding that you need a heightened level of awareness when you're operating on busy waters. And anywhere in Narragansett Bay is really busy during the peak of the season. And so when I see situations like that, it makes me want to talk more about safe boating. Now, how does everybody solve that problem? One simple thing: slow down. That's all. There's no big level of seamanship here. You don't need a captain's license. You don't need to have rescued 3,000 boats. Slow down. When in doubt, slow down. And don't approach anything faster than you are willing to hit it. And that'll solve 95% of your problems. 95% of your problems as they relate to rules of the road and risk of collision. Okay. Just one more great rule of thumb. There are local customs out there. And those customs, believe it or not, they've actually enforced it. They become a rule in some ways. There are certain areas where when the ferry comes in, everybody moves out of the way. And they've been doing it that way for years. Move out of the way, right? But those customs have stood up in court. So they're not written down in the 38 rules of the road, but they've been enforced as a local custom and therefore essentially as good as a local rule. So not too many on Narragansett Bay, but just be alert for them. You see some out in the Elizabeth Islands, Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard is the area where when the ferry comes in, everybody moves out of the way, no matter who you are. So I love rules like that because my personal opinion is I think sometimes we're a little bit too important when we're out there. Imagine me as a young towboat driver. I had a red boat with flashing lights on it, and I was like 25 years old, and I already had 10 years of experience. Can you imagine how important I thought I was back at that young age when you're sort of driven by by ego and testosterone. You know, as I've gotten older, I feel a lot less important to those things. But you know, when I teach professional boat captains, I say, look, remember to stop and think of your level of importance in this situation. And you know, if you're going fast in your recreational boat and you don't slow down, I'm kind of scratching my head going, well, where are you going? Like, what's the hurry? We're going to go out boating because you're there. Slow down, folks. It'll save many lives. A slide for high traffic areas. Narragansett Bay is home to some phenomenal maritime marine events, regattas, parades, things of that nature. Do your best to avoid them. They are listed in the notice to mariners. And if you Google the phrase local notice to mariners for Narragansett Bay, you will get the Coast Guard's weekly notice to mariners, and we'll tell you about them. Regattas are pretty easy to identify. Anytime you see a whole bunch of sailboats all grouped together looking like they're trying to go faster than each other, it's a sailboat race. It's a regatta. Now, regatta organizers love to say we're having a regatta here and we have the right. No, they don't. They get a permit from the Coast Guard to hold the regatta, and directly on that permit it says you do not have the right of way or any special rights under the rules of the road because you're holding this event. All right. But as a courtesy, you should try to avoid those things. You should try to avoid them. And from a safety standpoint, you should try to avoid them. Okay. In my days operating safe seaboats, I would activate the flashing lights on the boat to notify people that I was involved in a public safety operation. And for some reason, people love to drive up closer and see what the flashing lights are all about. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. When you see flashing lights on a red boat, go away. Those are my go away lights. Please give us a little bit of space to do our job. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. And although we love you, we would rather see you dockside. A raft up is not appropriate while we're working, even though we run big inflatable boats. So please stay clear. And finally, when I think about dicey areas in Narragansett Bay, I think about anywhere where there's a bottleneck, anywhere where there's a popular waypoint. And I know the time is getting on and I'm about to wrap it up. I just want to give you a heads up. I think of bottlenecks. I think of popular waypoints that you might enter in your GPS. And I think of just blind corners and leaving a dock. Okay. Anybody here regularly or routinely cross Route 95 on foot or even in your car? Of course not. You can't do that. All right. Well, if you see a large number of vessels going up a small area of water, you can't cross that either. You can't. I'm sorry. I don't care if you have a dinner reservation. I don't care what awaits the other side. You can't. And sometimes you have to be accepting of can't on the water. It can be hard. It's a bitter pill to swallow. I know, but it's true. Where's some great bottlenecks on Narragansett Bay? Newport Bridge is a big bottleneck. Almost everybody that's traveling underneath the Newport Bridge is going right for the center span, right? And if 10, 12, 15 boats are all going for the center span at the same time, things start to get pretty congested. I'm trying to think of some ways that we could slow down. We could slow down and that would make things safer. But the knee-jerk reaction is not to slow down for whatever reason. I encourage everybody to do that. Another bottleneck in Narragansett Bay is when you're coming up between Warwick Light and Patience Island. It's also very deep right there. It's about 80 feet of water right there. So when you get that southerly wind and you get an outgoing tide, it gets quite choppy. Add boat wakes from about 250 boats that have navigated through that area every hour. It gets really choppy through there. Anywhere where you have a bottleneck, you need to be prepared to sort of get flexible with your navigational plan, okay? Blind corners, particularly in a marina, you know, if you're new to boat handling, I would see situations, especially when I was towing boats. I'm towing boats into the slip where things are really narrow. And, if you're a newer boater, you sort of know that, that feeling, that feeling where, you let that last line off and you're like, oh, it's all up to me now. Right. I learned how to ski as an adult. It's sort of the same feeling when you get off the chairlift. I only learned how to ski about 10 years ago. I was like, oh, here we go. Right. That's sort of how you feel when you're pulling out of the dock when you're a new boater. Look, if someone's coming down that docking area, you can't pull out in front of them. You're going to hit them. You need to wait. You need to make sure no traffic is coming before you leave the dock. Another area of aggravation that I see is, I'll give you an example. Those of you that head out to Block Island, you go out past Point Judith or Beavertail, and you're going to punch a waypoint into your GPS, and you're probably going to punch in 1BI, which is the buoy just on the northwest corner out off the North Reef there, not too far, quarter, half mile, or maybe a mile. And that's what you aim for when you're navigating to Block Island. But there's also people coming from Point Judith, Stonington, Watch Hill, Long Island Sound. They're all heading for the same buoy. So as you approach your waypoint, everybody's converging on your waypoint at the same time. And even so, it's sort of out in the middle of Rhode Island Sound, or Block Island Sound anyway, which is basically out in the ocean. But suddenly you're going to start to see a lot of boats nearby. Why? Well, because they're all aiming for the same waypoint. They're all aiming for the same target. They've used that as their navigational reference. I usually, unless I'm responding to something and I'm in a big hurry, I put my waypoint a few hundred yards away from it. You don't have to go right on top of the thing to stay on course. I move my way. You might if you're in a narrow channel, but out in the middle of the ocean there, would move my waypoint over by a quarter of a mile, so I could still stay well clear of everybody on my approach to it. We've seen a lot of sort of unpleasant situations arrive when multiple boats start approaching the same waypoint at the same time from different angles. It can create a lot of confusion. You should be driving defensively. Again, traveling at that safe speed, having the ability to stop to avoid collision, not assuming, you try to get into the head of the other boater and do your best to figure out what it is that they're doing. But you can never really be sure. Your lookout should be in all directions. There was a tragic accident 2 years ago where someone was hit from behind. There was a number of situations that I came into when I was overtaking other vessels, and they took large course changes without looking over their shoulder before making the course change, and inevitably put us in a dangerous situation. You would not change lanes on the highway without checking your blind spot. You should not change the course on your boat without also checking your blind spot. So, and no good conversation about boating would be complete without talking about watching your wake. Now, your boat generates a great big wake, and the bigger your boat, potentially the bigger your wake. It's certainly depending on what speed and how many revolutions per minute, RPMs, you're traveling at. Okay, if your vessel is a planing vessel, I mean, the vessel comes up on plane and rides across the top of the water at a high speed, which most runabouts on Narragansett Bay are. It goes through a number of essentially 3 different phases. When you're driving slowly, you're displacing the water and moving it out of your way as you drive. As you begin to speed up and your bow comes up like this, you're in what they call semi-displacement mode. That's actually where you produce your largest wake. And then as you get up on plane and really start to speed off, then you're in planing mode. Okay. Your largest wake comes from semi-displacement mode. What I would often see on workboats is people coming along at a pretty good clip planed off. They're like, oh, there's some work going on here. Let's slow down for these folks. Thank you. And they slow down to semi-displacement mode, thus making the wake considerably larger and making the interaction more challenging. So you're either planed off in creating whatever size wake that you should be familiar with out of the back of your boat. Those of you that belong to Freedom Boat Club, it's going to vary a little bit from boat to boat. Or you're going real slow, like no wake, like you're in the harbor. But that middle ground there, when you're trying to reduce your wake, that's your biggest possible wake. And it travels for a good long time. There was a time just a few years ago when there was a boat sinking right off the spindle, Round Rock in East Greenwich. And I was saving it, and I had like this much freeboard, and it was slowly coming up, and I had a lot of pumps on, and then a big old boat went by, it like ranged, 150 yards away. But that boat threw a big wake, 40, 50 foot sea ray. That boat throws a big wake. Well, sure enough, lo and behold, one wake came bloop, over the back of the boat. The second wave came bloop, over the back of the boat, filled it back up, and the third one sank it to the bottom. And so what was originally going to be a boat that I had saved from sinking turned into a sunken boat. We had to spend considerably more time raising it. Now, I wasn't particularly angry at that boater. They were a good ways away. They didn't realize. But I tell you that story because that story is indicative of just how far your wake can travel. I worry a lot about paddle boarders and kayakers. I don't want to throw a big wake that tosses an inexperienced kayaker over and they drown because they don't know how to get their kayak back. It's a real possibility. It's a real possibility. So, don't be in such a hurry to get where you're going. You're going, as a recreational boater, you're going boating. And once you leave the dock, you're boating. So enjoy it, please, and take your time. Couple more quick strategies. I think that's our last slide. And we're just about 4 minutes over now. I don't want to monopolize your evening, so I appreciate you taking a little bit of extra time here, and I'll allow for some Q&A. You shouldn't be going out there without a voyage plan or a float plan. You can download them from the Boat US website. Tell someone where you're going and when you plan to return, so somebody misses you if you're late, particularly if you're going out for an extended period of time or an extended distance. I drive my boat alone a lot. And you know what? It can be as simple as a text message to somebody reliable. Hey, I'm going out my boat. I'm going here. I'm going to the yacht club. I'm coming back. I should be home in an hour, whatever the case may be. If you run into a problem, folks, if things get a little bit dicey and nobody's missing you, it gets pretty lonely pretty fast. It's pretty lonely pretty fast. I don't know if any of you watched it. There's a great movie out there. It was sort of gruesome because the man ended up cutting his own arm off, but he was a hiker, and it was called 128 Hours, I think. And he spent 128 hours pinned under a rock. And the major part of the problem was that he didn't tell anybody he was going hiking. He failed to, and he went way out into the wilderness hiking. And he would have been better off if someone missed him. They would have sent out a search party. If nobody misses you, nobody's looking for you. So, seek out, people, and I know, we have busy schedules and we want to get out on the boat and we got to get out there now. And, today's the only good day. I've been thinking about this boat all week, and I spent money on the membership, or I spent money on the dock, or I get it. I have one. I have a boat. I have children. I have a family. I understand. But you know what? You can't make the wind go away. You can't reduce the amount of traffic, right? So strategize. I see people not taking really beautiful boating opportunities. I love to get on the boat in the evening during the week. And I don't advocate drinking and boating, but I advocate my wife drinking while I boat and go on a cocktail cruise. And we go out from, 5 to 7. And there's less wind and there's less traffic and it's beautiful. And up until September, you're going to have lightness. So you're not navigating the dark if you don't know how to do that. And there's less wind when you're trying to figure out how to get your boat back in the dock. Yet I rarely see anybody else out there. It's a great time to learn how to go boating. Early in the morning, same thing. There's no wind at all on your typical summer day. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, almost no wind. And then the wind starts to slowly pick up after that on a typical summer day when the sea breeze picks up. So maybe the answer to your boating day is timing more than, Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, it's going to be busy. It's going to be windy. If you're a new boater, you're going to have an unpleasant experience, and then we're going to lose you. We don't want to lose you. We want you to stay in boating. So sometimes some strategy and timing is a really good thing. Your decision making is, we talk about this in the professional level all the time. And the example that I use is, somebody could come to me and say, Captain Kent, I would like a job. I would like that job, teaching or driving boats for you. I'm an excellent boat handler. I'm crackerjack, the best of the best. I'm like, great. Thank you. I'll take it into consideration. All right. And that person probably would not get hired. But you could come to me and say, hey, Captain Kent, you know what? I'm a pretty good boat handler. I make excellent decisions. Bingo. That person, we want that person with us, because it's really at the end of the decisions that you make are going to determine the level of safety when you're operating your boat, just like you operate your car. Everything is based on our own decisions. So sometimes ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing. I see so many incidences and so many boats that I've towed home or dragged home or pulled off the rocks or pumped out or brought back from the bottom for just unreasonable reasons. Like, why are you out here in the middle of the ocean? Well, we left Block Island, but it's foggy. Why'd you leave Block Island? Oh, well, we had a dinner reservation. All right, folks. You choose to be in boating, you might miss a dinner reservation. We had work on Monday. That was always a popular with Sunday, a busy day, because the people have been out at Block Island. They got to get home for work on Monday. Well, if there's 00 visibility and you don't know how to use your radar, don't go. Don't go. So don't let your passions or your commitments dictate your common sense. The great country song out there, one of the lines, and I love it for boating, is don't outsmart your common sense. Right? And that holds true, and particularly times 10 for boating. And then finally, many people asked me to add this, and that's talking about passenger seating. First of all, if you have children, especially small children, it's fun to take them out on the boat. I'm kidding. It's not actually that fun. It's mostly a lot of work, but I enjoy doing it no matter what. Okay. But they don't know that the boat is going to hit a wave. They're going to bonk their heads. If they're standing up, they're going to fall down. And they need to be taught to hold on. They need to be taught that one hand should be used to hold on to the boat, and then one hand can be used to tend to themselves should they need a hand. And if they don't need that other hand, they should be holding on with both hands. And don't take your kids boating unless someone's there to help you. I might take my 8-year-old boating, but I don't take my 4-year-old boating unless my wife is there to help, because you can't do all of those things at one time. You're taxing your abilities, particularly if you're a newer boater. Your passengers should be seated. People that are new to boating don't understand how it's going to move. I've brought friends out on cocktail cruises, and they're standing on the deck and they have a glass of wine and they're ready to be boating. Like, that's as far as they're going to move. They haven't held on to anything yet. You need to describe to those passengers about seating and holding on. There was a terrible accident up 2 or 3 or 4 years ago where a woman was standing up when the boat hit a wake and the boat stopped abruptly, and she was killed by hitting her head, by falling down and hitting her head on a cleat. It's very easy to have happen, and it's a very unpleasant way to go, and it was certainly unpleasant for everybody else on board. So, one hand for you, one hand for the boat, and keeping people seated, having an acute level of awareness for your passengers that don't have as much experience as boating. And if you don't have a lot of experience boating, be prepared for some excitement, right? Keep yourself seated and keep yourself holding on and keep yourself going slow. Finally, and if this doesn't bother every professional mariner out there, I don't know what does. People love to put their kids up on the bow to hold on to the bow rail while they splash into all the waves, and the kids dip their feet in the water and they get wet. And it's appalling. Do not do that. I cannot tell you how many children have died because they want to have fun holding up on the bow, including a close friend of mine just had to recover one very recently. Okay? The bow is not for sitting, not slow, not fast, not any time. Kids go in the back. Even if you have a bow rider, kids that you can't trust to hold on to themselves should be riding in the back. Sitting up on the bow, holding onto the railing and letting your feet dangle in the water is a deadly thing to do. Please do not do that. I will say I won't give many directives to you because I want you to go out there and enjoy yourself. But that is one absolute directive. Please do not do that. That brings me to the end of what I hope, in your opinion, has been a valuable number of different takeaways. I have gone a little bit over by about 13 minutes, and I don't want to monopolize your night, but I will make myself available for questions and answers. But most importantly, let me just leave you with this thought. Boating is one of the most precious things that in Rhode Island we can offer to people. And I want to see it thrive. And I want to see people do well out there. And I want to see them enjoy themselves. But mostly, I want to see you be safe. And when you're new at it, you're not quite sure how dangerous it is. So, pick the less wind, pick the less traffic. And, just like you were learning to ski, you wouldn't pick the double black diamond the first day. Don't feel compelled to go to Block Island on your first trip, or Newport or Jane. It might be you just cruise around the harbor a little bit, and that's okay. You'll live to find another day to go a little further the next time. And, venture out incrementally. Don't feel pressured to be amazing, or don't feel pressured to do things that you don't have a level of skill and experience left to do yet. So, Kate, do you want to, and thank you for coming, by the way. I hope that this has been very helpful. And I really appreciate the fact that you've all taken time out of your schedule to listen to me talk. So, Kate, did you want to?
Yeah, so what I've done now is people can actually unmute themselves. Mark actually has a question, and I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, Mark, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can, Mark. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So I was just curious. I posted a question in the chat just about the expectations regarding the jurisdiction and the assistance that one might expect from local harbor masters in the Bay versus the U.S. Coast Guard.
I see. It's a good question. So your harbor master is going to be responsible for that harbor. He's going to enforce the local ordinances, particularly the no wake. There's likely a no wake zone if he's in that harbor. The moorings are his or her responsibility, and the safety in that area. And they have somewhat of an obligation to respond to emergencies within their area of responsibility, and they oftentimes will. They oftentimes don't have a ton of resources on their boat to help. But they can get there and pick someone up out of the water or hold them off the rocks or something until a more capable vessel gets there. Okay. The U.S. Coast Guard has ultimate responsibility to enforce all of the laws and respond to all of the emergencies, but they can't be everywhere all at the same time. Okay. And those are for emergencies only. If you're talking about, say, getting towed home because your boat is broken down, that's a responsibility of a commercial provider. Just like you wouldn't get towed home by a police car or a fire engine, those vessels shouldn't be towing you home. You should get towed home by a commercial towing provider because those other services are designed to save your life in life-threatening situations. So, does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. What's next, Kate?
Mark was actually the last one. If anybody else would like to ask a question, I think feel free to take yourself off mute.
Unmute and hit me with it.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said that. Yeah, you said that CBD wasn't recognized except internationally, but isn't a guy constrained to be in a channel constrained by draft vessel?
Nope. Rule 3 definitions excludes constrained by draft in the inland rules. They're only in the international rules. So he has different protections under Rule 9. No,
so he's a ram because he has a restricted ability to maneuver.
Nope.
No, because that's not by mechanical problem, right?
He's not due to the nature of his work, and he's not on a command because he doesn't have an exceptional circumstance. He just got a tough driving situation.
Okay, so it absolutely doesn't apply.
Yeah, the Coast Guards, they're stickler for their words, Andy, right? And they're pretty verbatim. They're by the book.
Yeah, and I have one other comment. You made the point that you want to make a significant course change. And I think, I just think your point was just absolutely super and super well made. And I'd like to add to it, because I think the point is to understand that every maneuver you make on a boat is not just about your boat. It's also a signal to the other boats that are out there as to what your intentions are.
Correct.
And so making your intentions clear is critically important in any maneuvering situation. Would you agree with that?
Yes, it is. That's well said.
So Captain Kent, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, it's Mark Alio again.
Hi, Mark.
So, hey, I'm the American Canoe Association State Director for Rhode Island, and also quite active in the Appalachian Mountain Club Narragansett Chapter. And so we have a lot of paddlers out in the bay. And I'm just wondering if you have any words of wisdom or suggestions or perspectives on with the advent of more and more stand-up paddle boarders, as well as kayakers, what suggestions you might have for enhancing safety or promoting awareness within the boating community with regard to these paddlers out on the bay?
Well, I think in reality, we need to have some deeper conversations and have to come to the best solution, some longer term dialogues. But let me start with some of the low hanging fruit.
Yes.
Particularly if you're in a harbor or a congested waterway. One of the things that would drive me absolutely bonkers is, I'd come into, say, Wickford Harbor. Have you ever paddled out the kayak center?
I have.
Yeah, and you think everybody paddles out the main channel, but I'm like, I can only go in the main channel. You can go in all this water over here that's only a foot deep. Like, why don't they go over there, do that, and that would be a huge help. Now, I love paddleboarding. I think it's great. I don't know a ton of kayaking, but I enjoy the paddleboarding. But I think we're a long way from a harmonious relationship between the boats and the paddleboarders. At a minimum, I'd love to see them wearing some brighter clothing.
Right.
I'll tell you, my son sails out of Saunderstown Yacht Club. He sails he sails what they call a Blue Dragon. He's 8 years old. The Blue Dragon is basically a plastic Optimist. It's a small pram style sailboat. And he got back from his day of sailing one day this summer and came up to me and told me that he had sailed all the way across Narragansett Bay to Jamestown from Saunderstown, which means he sailed all the way along the course of the Jamestown Bridge to Jamestown. And he came back. And I was far more petrified than I was proud. You would think as a professional mariner, I'd be quite proud of my 8-year-old for having navigated across the West Passage. No, it's horrifying. I was horrified. Let me tell you why I was horrified. Because there's 40,000 registered boats in the state of Rhode Island. Many of them are underway at any given time. And I just do not believe that they're looking where they're going.
Right.
I think they're looking at their GPS, trying to figure out where they're going to go. I think they're looking at their phones. I think they're taking selfies. I think they're trying to get their kids tended to. I think they're trying to, talk to their wife about whatever. And they're not looking where they're going. And that petrifies me. And I worry about all those children at that yacht club. I worry actually quite a bit about them.
Yeah, I'm concerned about visibility too. And I'm just wondering, formally, when you talk about the rules of the road, you got a paddleboarder out there who may or may not have. Exactly. So what would you say about that? Any perspective on that?
Politely, when you're at the bottom of the pecking order, act like it.
Right.
Get out of it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to delineate anybody's fun, but if we don't follow the rules of the road are one of the few things that the government's put together that actually really works well. If we follow them. We follow them, so nobody's going to have fun if we don't, is the problem.
Yeah. Thank you, Captain Kent.
My pleasure. I wish I had a friendlier answer there. Really good.
That's okay.
I wish there was a better. I've dreamed of, one of the things I've dreamed up has been lanes. like designated lanes, like if you want to leave Wickford and go to Jamestown, have an area that's marked on a navigational chart that a high number of oar-powered vessels might be found in this area, and mark
Like a bike lane.
Like a bike lane, like with
Like
ski mountains right now, if you want to go uphill, they have designated uphill travel lane, so that way you stay out of the way of
Correct.
groups or something if you're trying to do your early mountain up. Same with a bike lane, same with
It would
anything.
not be a
I think
hard
they're
thing
actually
to achieve.
considering, the Waterfront Commission in Newport has been talking about.
Yeah. It would not be a hard thing to achieve
paddling
in
lane.
Narragansett Bay, but we can't get people to follow the red, the green, and the no wake buoys. I don't know how you're going to get them to follow a new buoy.
Yeah, thank you.
It's unfortunate, but that is. Any other questions, folks?
One last question.
Yes, sir.
I truly appreciate your talk. It was absolutely wonderful.
I'm happy to be here. I'm flattered so many people wanted to listen to me. I'm going to tell my wife how many people showed up. Like, there was no way that many people wanted to listen to you.
It was so instructive. Is there any way to access this recording and archive so we can get other people to listen to it?
Yeah, it'll go right up on our YouTube channel for sure.
God bless you.
Andy, you'll get an email in a couple days once I upload it, and we'll send everybody who registered a link, and we'll post it to our website.
Deeply appreciated.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for coming.
Nice job. Nice job.
Any other questions, folks? There's no bad question. There might be a bad answer, but I'll do my best. But there's no bad questions. Don't be afraid to ask if I can.
I got one.
Yeah.
Are you hiring?
I can barely handle all the people we got now.
I've left the island. I'm in New Bedford trying to get a job.
Well, if you join the Professional Captains Association, it can help you network and post jobs on the job board.
I
and things
am a
like that.
member of the Professional Captains Association.
Oh, is that?
Do you want to be a launch driver? There's a lot of launch
theater,
drivers.
yes.
I couldn't see who that was. I'm sorry. Did you
I'm
put
just
your,
too,
did you
I'm,
put your
I'm just
resume
too
up on
damn
the-
old to be nobody wants to hire an old man,
Yeah, as long as you're a good decision maker.
Jamestown Boatyard needs launch drivers. JBY.com.
I'll tell you, Eric, there are a lot of launch operators. I know the question is, they're kind of far, but I know Prime Marina, I know Jamestown Boatyard. I'm pretty sure Old Porter's still hiring, and I know that the Newport Harbor Master is hiring. There's 4 right there.
Yeah.
It would be a bad gig for you, Eric.
There
you go.
are no trawlers leaving the frickin' island because of COVID. And I'm actually painting a sailboat over here on the New Bedford area. It's sitting up on stands, and I'm in an empty house, which is a really nice place to be with my client, but I need to be on the water. So,
Well, if you send me something, I'm happy to pass it on. Yeah, that Harbor Master gig might be a nice place to start for you, Eric.
thank you.
All right. Somebody else had their hand. Kit, you wanted to say?
Yeah, when you were giving your explanation about who's the Giveway
Yeah,
and who's
Giveway and
the stand-on
stand-on.
vessel, I had to catch myself. You were talking a lot about the tack, and I just thought that there might be some folks tuning in that are not aware of how to tell the tack of the sail.
Let them have it. For those of you that don't know, Kit is our instructional designer and project manager here at Confident Captain, the Professional Captains Association. She'll do a much better job of explaining it.
Well, the way I always remember it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if the wind is coming across the port side of the vessel, then it's on a port tack. And if the wind is coming across the starboard side of the vessel, it's on a starboard tack. Super easy.
You are 100% correct. That is
Rather than trying to think about the sails, because then you start getting very confused.
Yep, that's true. Thanks, Kit.
No
I did
worries.
That's not quite correct, because you could be sailing by the lee. So the tack you're on is defined by the boom that you're on. That's especially true downwind when you've got a spinnaker out, where it's not obvious which
True.
direction the wind is
Yep.
from.
Boom is over the starboard side. You're on a starboard tack.
Which is why,
No,
though, we
no, you're
pointed
on a
out when
port
you're
tack.
on that slide, if you don't know, assume they're on starboard and stay out of the way.
Kate, I see a lot of new messages, but I can't read through them.
Mostly it's people saying, thanks, great presentation, solid presentation, thanks for joining. So no, there hasn't been any questions. And everybody, Andy had a couple questions, but he just asked them live. Mark had some questions he asked live. So
Any other questions from the audience?
it was great to see so many Freedom Boat Club folks who are
Yeah.
coming out and enjoying the bay. And I think that's you know, if everybody kind of does their part. I was talking to Kent earlier today. I sort of use the like picking up trash analogy sometimes. You know, sometimes people are like, why is there so much trash around? There, people should be throwing their stuff out. And you just go, or you could just every time if you go for a walk, you know, especially if you're their dog and you got your doggy bag anyway, just pick up a couple more pieces of trash and just be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And so if we all just do our part to educate other people and, you know, try to
Well, we
help
do our
be
part to
better
do a good
boaters.
job, you know,
Yeah. we're
conduct
being part of the
ourselves
solution.
well. And you know what, for years I've been, all these sailboaters and all these power boaters. And folks, I'll tell you what, none of us is perfect. And the only person any of us should really be worrying about doing a good job is ourselves. And when I was, you know, a young, you know, highly spirited salvage boat captain, you know, and I had the world right where I wanted it. I was a little bit cocky when I was out there. And by the time I got to retiring from that job after 28 years, I can tell you that most times when I got underway, I was a lot better mariner, because the question I asked myself, or the thought that I had as I was leaving the dock, you would think I had 28 years of experience, I'd feel quite confident leaving the dock every time, didn't I? And certainly some of the parts I probably was, but for the most part, I was like, well, I hope I don't screw this up.
What's your headline?
And when I switched to that mindset, right? When I switched to that mindset, I became a better boat operator. I had to get a little bit older before I did. Now, Eric's brought up a point. Eric completed our 100-ton captain's class not long ago. And he brought up a point that I usually like to make at the end of most of my seminars, which is, what's your headline? Okay, now, you know, your headline might be recreational boater went out on boat for a day and, you know, came home and everybody was safe and everything was great. That's the sort of headline we're looking for. But, you know, you're one bad decision in life away from a bad headline. You know, what's my headline right now? My headline is, you know, boat captain shares knowledge with others on Zoom and goes upstairs and eats dinner and tucks his kids in. That's a headline I'm striving for. Let's say I go upstairs and we're out of milk, right? We're out of milk. And so I decided to go to the store and buy some milk. And then on my way to the store, my wife texts me and says, get orange juice while you're there, or don't come back without any orange juice, would probably be more likely how she would phrase it. And I checked that text message and I hit a minivan and kill somebody. That's my headline now. Boat captain kills people, right? But that really is true. I did. And it's because I made one bad decision to check my phone, right? So you know, we used to have this woman in my office, a good friend of mine. She's super duper. She's sort of even keeled. She was sort of the antidote to me, because I'm not even keeled at all. I'm excitable, and she just very quietly looked up from her computer one day. She's busy at work and listening to a conversation. She goes, you know, we're all just one bad decision away from the ACI. Then went back to work again. But she's right.
Funny. Yep.
She's right. And so particularly, you know, the young sailing instructors and the young professional mariners, you got guys going out that are finishing up our courses that are carrying 12, 15, 20, 30 people at a time. 30 people that don't know much about boating. It's a big order. It's a tall order. And so I say, don't forget your headline. Don't forget your headline, because when people start to say it out loud, it paints a different picture. So think about your headline before you get out on your boats, please. It's important. All right, friends. It was nice seeing all of you. So many people stayed for so long and listened to everything I have to say.